Well, there we are. Can you hear me now? That would seem to be better. Alrighty. So I hope that fixed it. And if so, thank you and welcome back. I'm Jonathan, and we are talking session zero. We are talking about the nations of Nikos, and I'm frozen. There, I'm not frozen anymore. Okay, good. Alrighty. So if you're still with me, give me another shout out, GMG. I'm not following where I'm lost my mind here. So anyway, so we are dealing with the world of Nikos, and we are discussing the nations, cities, and environs. There are 170 or so cities scattered across the population across the surface of the planet. Many of them close enough together they could go to conflict or they could share peacefully, depending on the point in time and leadership and such. We also are dealing with the issues that there are vast areas where there is no city, there is no population center per se. Game Master Vault, if you're on, let me know whether my sound is better because I think I fixed it. I'm not certain. So, anyway, the concept of nations are simply confederations of various countries at different times as they connect to become nations, if you will. A city state is an established governance as a government, but is not necessarily an entire nation. Nation, therefore, is a city with its supporting villages and such around, and then countries. I'm sorry, countries are the affiliation of the villages around a specific city, and then nations are a confederation or an affiliation of cities to become a nation. The map behind me, it does not do a fair representation of uh, plant life or anything. It's a general understanding of the terrain types, and so at some point we'll go over all the different biomes or biospheres that exist within the world of Nikos, but they're also a considerable number, so we'll be doing time. We are getting to the next section, which is cultural centers. And cultural centers tend to be those facilities that are affiliated with one or more species who hold similar views about a particular condition or environment. So, for example, in the area where in Andara the forest is, as I described earlier, you have the specifics of the Great Northern Forest. And the Great Northern Forest is considered to be a cultural area because not only the Inundaran, but the humans and many of the sect-gen species have unified to care for the Great Northern Forest. And we'll go in more into that at a later time as well. The agendas of the cultural centers are drivers, if you will, to the story of Nikos. They are mechanisms that give a purpose for adventuring groups to travel in the world. And so, therefore, they are as widely different as there are different countries, nations, and such like, so that they're hard to define. And I'm realizing that this video is this is a test bed, folks. We're still working out the details here. Next below that in definition would be the notable historic and enjoined persons, and this would be characters of the ancient past, whether they were particularly enemies of the players and became nemesis characters in history, or whether they were actually previously enjoined persons who did things of note within the time frames. In either case, these notable and historic enjoined persons will be a segment of the Session Zero Chronicles. So next week there'll be a name of a specific person or persons that we're going to cover. The next down are artifacts and edifices, and in like fashion, we will be pinpointing a specific artifact or group of artifacts or a specific location or a specific archetype of facility that can be found everywhere as a stepping stone to being able to play. Then the next will be famous battles and notable appearances, and these will generally be in relation to a location on the world of Nikos, and the notable appearances of either avatars or champions of the age or whatever, and so that'll be a separate section. Then we're going to talk about the impact of the history of Nikos on past iterations and how time has flown not only forwards as you would expect, but also backwards and has changed historicity from time to time. So we're going to be going into that. And then finally, the last section of each episode will be a iterational initial influence, and that'll be the things that are particular to the 9th iteration, most modern time frame, that will be an influence on characters in game. So if you're on with me, Game Master Vault, go ahead and please let me know that my voice, my sound is working properly, because as you noted, I was having difficulty with it earlier. If not, whoever you are that's on with me now, please leave me a note. Okay, good. Alrighty, so we're through the outline, but I want to go back over the specifics. So I'm going to give an example. The species of Nikos in this first episode that I spoke of were the Inandaran, and I gave a bit of their history, where they came from, and what they are like. Because there are 35 species, it'd be difficult to do it all in a single session 0. Hence, the session 0 Chronicles are going to be a time period where I can specify one each week and go into the details of that one. I had forgotten that was my original form of this, and so I started with a very confusing bit, but we'll go on. Second will be nation, cities, environs, and I will actually have shown on the map specifically that nation, city, or environ. I'll talk about what its characteristics are, how it might apply if that is where the game becomes held for you in Nikos. Then I'll talk about cultural centers, and generally be the one that surrounds that particular nation or city or environment that I've spoken of to show context. Then I'll talk about a notable historic person or persons in that location at a particular time, and also speak of the players who may have had characters that were from there who are now historically seen as having been enjoined persons, and how that applies to player characters. Then I'll talk about artifacts and edifices that are in that locale, or have been in that locale, or are associated with that locale. And then we'll talk about famous battles or conflicts or challenges that occurred there, and the notable appearances of the champions of history, the heroes of old, if you will. Then we're going to talk about the impact on past iteration that this specific nation, city, or environment had impact on. And then finally, how they are influenced at the beginning. So by the time you've finished session 0, each time you will have found a new location and a new group of player character possibilities and a new feel for concepts about the culture that is found in that place. Because of that, the final episodes will run right at about an hour, which is about how long as we've taken this time, but we had a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to have to carry over a little bit further. The Session 0 Chronicles are meant to be a way for you as a player and a viewer to actually begin to participate as a character within Nikos. And what that means is that as I finish each session, if there's a particular persona and a certain species of Nikos that you wish to portray, we can start the building process of a character for you directly here in chat after the session, because I'm going to stay on air for about an hour before my next episode of Game Master's Soapbox, which will be starting at 11. So if you have enough information to go on that you want to just start diving deeper immediately, feel free to join me in the chat, because I'm going to use the hour 2 of the show, if you will, to start working with character development and building a character for you in the world of Nikos so that you can play alongside other people, either while I'm running a live stream game or if you wish to join one of my online games. And I do have a considerable number of those available that I haven't been broadcasting about, but will definitely be promoting in Hour 2 going forward. Also realize that the Session 0 in this case is always going to apply to Nikos RPG, the fantasy setting of Dark Shards, which is the rule book, it's called the system book for the fantasy or the magic section, if you will. And there will be additional Session Zeros being added as I get ramped up and have time to have the properties available. In the meantime, thank you for joining us, Game Master Vault, and anybody else that's with us. If you have anything you'd like to add or question or whatever, feel free. Since we're not doing a full-on episode of Session 0 until next week now, I can answer any questions you might have. So it's kind of like treated as an Ask Me Anything hour. And I know we've gone far afield a couple of times, and I always enjoyed our conversations. So that's really kind of what has always been my focus in doing videos. I want it to become conversational in tone and not just merely a monologue, because there are other game masters that do that and other people who are helping game masters who also are just simply pontificating, and I don't want to be that guy. So get a bit of a drink here. I don't know why, but I get parched when I talk. Also, so tonight's, as a quick preview, I have my schedule for the Game Master Soapbox. I'll flip it up on the screen for just a second for you. Look at that. So we're going to be talking about, oh, that was yesterday. No, it was yesterday's. Oh no, I haven't changed it. I have to get up and fix that. Yikes. I'm doing great today, batting 1,000. Alrighty, so I'll be back to this for now. So exciting. I keep trying. I figure if I do this enough times, eventually I'll get past the jitters and I'll get past the mistakes, and we'll have a polished and presentable series of episodes. yeah. But in the meantime, I want to have a lot of fun, so that's really what it's all about for me. And the reason why I do this, because it's get a charge out of doing it. So I do want to invite you to continue with the Nikos Session 0 Chronicles. Every night we're going to be going over these categories of things, but on different locales on the adventure world known as Nikos, which is the map up here behind me. And you are more than welcome to check out my website, Nikos RPG, which has access to a character sheet at no cost. You can just download the PDF. Also available is the Dark Shards Handbook in PDF format from there. If you are looking for a hard copy, which is a softback book, but if you wish to get a hold of a softback copy of Nikos RPG printed version, you would go to lulu.com, lulu.com, and search for my name, Jonathan Albin, and therefore be able to find the book that way. And they are sites that I am wholly involved with. It's not like I'm doing this to bench for somebody else. This is a product that I devised. I had a co-author on the very first product, but we have a lot of stuff to cover whenever you're going to play in a role-play game, and today's episode was a template for what we're going to be doing in the future. So when we speak of the species of Nikos, and I gave the example here of Inandera, we're going to do the same thing with the nations and cities, the culture centers, and so on. So each week you'll get a taste of each one of these. So if you're just joining now and weren't aware of what we're doing, we are pre-setting up what will be an online role-play game where you won't have to buy a ticket, you won't have to have a camera and a microphone. You'll be able to simply play from the viewer's chair by submitting your comments or interest of your character in the chat box. So if you wanted to deep dive into that right now, feel free to put put a number one in the chat so I know that you're interested, and I'll go and start going into that process. If you have not yet downloaded the character sheet, I would recommend hopping over to Nikos RPG and go to products or the shop, and then in the shop you'll find the no cost PDF of the persona packet. We talked last week, I believe, about the structure of a character, and so this one was to be an idea of the outline of the episodes going forward, because I realized how much there was to present in a session 0 that couldn't be done in a video setting instantaneously with players asking all kinds of questions at the same time. So this way kind of gives an orderly way of doing that. That notwithstanding, I would give you a little bit of background. The Nikos RPG stems from Nikos, the fantasy realm, which was created by me starting in roughly 1975, 76. It was during my very first year of creating the materials that became my campaign, because I had learned how to play Dungeons and Dragons only the year before under Dave Arneson, one of the guys that designed the game. I was only 11 years old at the time, and so my first ideas of what it would be to have a country or a continent or whatever that wasn't even in my head. It was just simply I had an adventure place, and that world was called Nikos. And if I can get out of the way enough, back up here a minute. Right above my right temple? Right here is the area. Move hand. There we go. This area right here is the area that originally started as the entire world of Nikos. And as my players explored and expanded between 75 and 76, this map was formed conceptually. And by 1978, the graphed version, the hex mapped version of this was created. So this world has existed since then as it is, fundamentally, with a few alterations over time, leading to the current formation, which includes the land bridge of Eldrissar, linking Groland to Nordland, and then Nordland, of course, then connects across the entire base to Yardlam. I'm using both the old name and the new name, so that's confusing, I'm sure. When you're a storyteller and a game master and you're trying to develop an idea that people can play in, you kind of have to go to the bare bones of what the minimum structure would be. And when you first start, you go the other direction. You go all the way down to what is going on in this little village, because all that you're concerned with is where do the players live, where's the adventure going to be, how long does it take to get from point A to point B, are there any trade partners that community is going to be involved with, what kind of items are going to be on regular rotation for trade, where are luxuries going to come from, if there are any, and what are their food sources, and you start building up and up and up in scale. And at some point you reach a point of terminus. And for me, the point of terminus was developing the continental maps. You see, I've always had the challenge with players in that I would draw a map for an adventure, and I would describe specifically where that adventure was going on, and the players inevitably would decide to go left or right or south or whatever direction wasn't on the map that I had created. And that used to bug me because as they would go that direction, I wasn't prepared. I didn't have adventures planned in that direction. I didn't have any idea of what was beyond the border because I'd only mapped to the borders. And in 78, when I finalized the creation of this map, that's when I decided at that point that if this is the map of Nikos, then all adventures happen here. And so no matter which direction they go, I know what's going on literally in the next hex and the next, 20 miles as they move from point to point. There's something going on, and so there's always something more to pursue. This, I think, contributed to my play style, which is very quantum in its nature. In other words, when you are traveling on Nikos and you're going great spans of distance, there's not a lot of attention given to what you're passing over or passing through, except for the points that become focuses. So as you are traveling across a desert, for example, and we've determined that you have found an oasis, the oasis then gets put on the map. The mapped oasis position then is filled out, and we know what creatures are around it and such like. So even though the map was fairly sparse when I first created it, at this point it's much more developed than that, to the point where you can travel 49 miles in any direction and find yourself in an entirely different pool of potential adventures, not excluding the ones that you are already involved with. So if you are merely traveling, that passing through that hex can only be, well, a danger to the party if the party begins to focus on the actions in that area. Otherwise, it continues to be on whatever they were focused on before. So knowing that, therefore, your character development is also kind of pinpoint. We go to specifics and we create numbers for those specifics, but everything else beyond that are general activities. Hence the creation of the character as it does. You build the base, which is the numbers that will be used in all considerations if you have no skill. And then you build out the skills from there. And then whenever you come to a situation where a particular skill doesn't apply, then you can always fall back to that base. So you've got the base that gets developed. From that, to go to more specifics, you go to the species or race. Once you get to developing the race, then you start building out what those racial conditions are, what things happen specifically because you are that race, in terms of your training and your background and your family and your appearance and your physical appearance and characteristics that come from that. So, for example, we are talking about the Enandarans. The Enandarans have a series of skills that are considered to be their familial marks. So, for example, the larger ears give them better hearing. The larger, more pronounced eyes give them additional visual functionality, and so on and so on. And so their skills, their natural structure gives them additional bonus benefits, if you will, that act as if they were skills when it comes to advancement. Once you've got those, then you go on to the place from which the character origin comes, and that's what we're kind of referring to when we talk of the nation cities and cultural centers. We are talking about those things that influence the player in terms of what skills they might know by the very background of their species. And once you've developed the place, then you deal with the estates, and that is the cultural standing that your player character's familial background comes from, and what they therefore have as far as resources and as skills bases and such. Then once you have those done, then we determine what the way your character wishes to start his life, what skill base would you want to prefer to follow. And while they are listed as separate in terms of where you would learn them, they are not separate in terms of which ones you can pursue. So, for example, if you look at the skills of the Way of Intrigues, maybe you did want to start with a background in, I don't know, clerical work. Perhaps you were a a minor scribe in an abbey or a monastery someplace. That position would give you certain skills potentials, and there's a considerable number of them. There are, I think, 2 or 3 pages worth of them. So there's a lot of options, but that's not your only options. And so you can choose to take some from that way of life, but perhaps you like the idea of a blacksmith, and so you want to go with the way of makers, learn how to construct and make things. Or maybe you were fascinated by magic, so you went into the ways of wonders. The idea is that all of these are open to everyone, but you can specialize if you so choose. Having finished out those things, you have all that you need to play, and therefore, in this environment, you would have your persona with your skills bases already pre-filled out, pre-developed as we start to play, and therefore you're able to start without having to. I don't have to have a copy of your character sheet. I don't have to have any of those requirements for you to be able to play, but instead you have the ability to immediately start to interact as that character. So the session zeros are just a precursor to what will be my reattempt, and I still have ongoing, just so you know, a role play session already set up on Twitch for this format. So if you are wanting to play a role play game with me, you don't have to have any special connection. You don't have to go to the point of speaking on Discord. You can actually communicate your actions through the chat in my Saturday event. I'm still calling it right now the Open Twitch Experiment, because I'm endeavoring to create a place where role players can just jump in and start playing immediately as a viewer. They don't have to go to the point of actually being involved with the operation or administration of it at all. But as a quick also side note, if you are interested in this process and would like to be involved through verbal means, and you want to be involved and have your voice heard during the episodes and such, you can certainly join our Patreon account. And if you do the $20 level, you gain access to our Discord. And having access to the Discord and the verbal channels there, you can actually be a speaker on the show, if you will. As a matter of fact, I'm not currently on, but as of the second, am now on our voice channel. So if you have access to our Patreon and if you have access to our Discord and are on our Patreon, you can jump on and join and play. Today, we can actually have you on for a few more minutes here. I endeavor to start my next episode at 11 o'clock, which would be the Game Master's Soapbox, and I will be dropping out of this to reset for that right around 10:45. So we've got lots of time until then. But the conversation as we are having it now is open to anybody who wants to drop in a Ask Me Anything question. The format of this kind of slipped a bit because I was not as equipped to do this episode as I thought, and so we had some trouble with the audio at the beginning, and so we will be going through the first official episode, if you will, of Session Zero Chronicles next week, even though it's currently showing episode 2. There's a story behind it. There always is. There's always a story behind everything. Isn't that the way that goes? So I'm ready to respond to any questions you might have, so feel free to drop any text you'd like into. Just simply say hi and that you're a part of the community. We'd be glad to have you. If you haven't yet, make sure you follow the channel so you're made aware each time I broadcast, and also to like this video, and also to consider checking out our YouTube channel, which is at Nikos RPG as well. So you just go to YouTube and then put in the search the ampersand Nikos RPG. So, is that right? Ampersand? No, not ampersand. The at symbol. It's now the at symbol. It's the A with a circle around it. But if you go to our channel, then there's a considerable number of videos. I have a couple of podcasts I'm running, including a Game Masters Academy and all of that. And and as arguably one of the longest running game masters in the world, since I did start uh, by learning from one of the guys that designed the game, I believe about 6 months before it was released, or at the latest 6 months after it was launched. I'm not sure. I think it was before, because the the guy who was my game master was Dave Arneson, and this was in the fall, so it was either, well, it's a fall or winter, so it was either late 1974 or early 1975, and I've been a game master every week since then for all of that time. So therefore, that may give some context for some of the terms that I use. I've spoken of the iteration, and the iteration is the whole of a single passage through the story arc. So from the beginning of a game session arc until the completion of that entire story is roughly 7 years, 6 years. And therefore, in those 6 years, we've completed a complete arc. Well, I have restarted the arc 8 times before. And so this is the 9th iteration, or the 9th time through the grand story arc, and we're just literally at the beginning. So players who start now will be able to experience the entire 9th iteration over the next 6 years. I know it sounds optimistic to think that it will still be playing role-play games, and we won't be like 3D viding each other in our homes and whatever might come from technology in the future. And I don't anticipate that I will ever be replaced by a chat GPT, only because my sense of humor is too quirky. But who knows? There may be eventually a chat GPT that could write you an adventure after the manner of myself. Anyway. So with the descriptions I've given, are there any comments or questions or concerns that have come up so far? I know that finding me on Twitch is an endeavor, because there are literally at any given hour hundreds of other game masters running games, and from a vicarious standpoint, you can just jump in and enjoy someone else telling the story. But I'm offering you the opportunity, starting on this Saturday morning, the opportunity to actually play via your current condition. You don't have to have a special membership, and you don't have to be a member of a Discord to play. You can play directly from the conversation chat. I know there are people that are concerned because they say, well, if you get more than 20 or 30 people, it'd make it hard for you to game master. Well, I have administered groups as large as 107 players over a 7-hour game session, and it's just fine. So there are ways to accomplish it, and the possibilities are endless. And I would love to be challenged to that point. So I would give you the challenge to go grab 3 or 4 of your friends and say, hey, we're going to break this game master. We're going to show him he can't do what he thinks he can do on Saturday morning. But the session starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time on this channel, on Discord, and on Twitch. And we are also in the Nikos RPG Discord as well. So if you become a Patreon supporter, then you get access to that and can actually be an audible voice heard on the show. And whether you stay for the entire episode, only do a shout in or whatever, that's fine as well. And if you do become a Patreon supporter, even if you don't come to the point of playing with us, I do shout outs for my new Patreon members every week. So I'll be glad to do that as well. Let's see. I never talk too much. I never talk too much. You guys all just listen too well. So there is that. So if there's anything that you would like to ask, feel free to do so. I'm very proactive when it comes to communication. And if you are watching this on YouTube later and don't have the opportunity to shout into the chat, feel free to drop a comment and I will respond to you there. I have sort of pledged to provide 100% response, even to naysayers and trolls. I've actually had conversations already with troll, and I found that trolls, really don't have a problem with them regenerating. As a matter of fact, the fire that tends to put out the way you put out their lights, so to speak, is to light a fire of communication with them because they don't really want to sit and respond. So there you go. So thank you. I see now we have three persons online. Hooray! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, if you subscribe to the Twitch channel, you also get to be noted in our little contest down at the bottom. You see it says, let's build a community. We're trying to get to 10 subs. If we get to 10 subs, I will sing a stupid song. And if we get to 15 subs, I will not sing a silly song. So it would endeavor you to get more people to be subscribers so we don't have to go through that horrible tragedy. But no, I love to sing, and I'm not very good at it. So no, I know you don't, GMV. You get to talk to me all the time, and you don't make fun of me. That's good. It's not good to make fun of the challenged. So, so I don't know how. I didn't mean to call you a troll. I wasn't responding to you as a troll. You're a funny guy. I've had conversations with you more than once. So smart aleck. Yeah, yeah. No, the troll posted to one of my comments I made about. I was talking about role play. Excuse me. I was talking about role play styles, and I was speaking of the difference between a railroad and a sandbox. And the person posted that I was in error because I admitted that my game style was somewhat manipulative, but that I considered someone who tried to hold the game master to the notes that that person had written was somewhat of a gaslighter, and he thought that was, he made the snarky comment that I shouldn't equate those, and so I had to respond to him. But that's the only troll, not you, GMV. You've been absolutely loyal, and I greatly appreciated you being here. I've got several other fans that have been on continually in the past. This broadcast used to include live stream games, and it will again in the future. I guess I should also mention that I'm doing a active search now for players who would like to be involved in a live stream on-screen game. And if you are interested in that, I would request that you send a couple a 2-minute video via. You can do it via the chat here. Send me a link to it, or you can email me, and the email information is available on the channel as well. So. I would never call you a troll, GMV, unless you wanted to be a troll. You know, in today's world, you have to recognize people for what they identify, right? So if you identified as a troll, I suppose. And by the way, if you're a troll on Nikos, you live in Arctic regions, and they stem from the very tough ice trolls all the way down to the powder trolls, as you can possibly imagine. And while they sometimes have susceptibility to fire, some of them are actually resistant to fire and have other susceptibilities. Oh. Trollolly? A trollolly? He's a troll ally. Yeah. Troll adjacent. So on Nikos, that's also an interesting thing. The very concept of names blurs somewhat, because in the 1970s, one of the biggest challenges is that the Monster Manual had come out, and players, along with game masters, were buying the books, and therefore the players were reading through all the descriptions of all the monsters and learning from the book all the weaknesses, which was really a pain in the keister as you're trying to introduce the characters to a new experience. You start to describe a monster, and the players go, oh, okay, according to page 127, that's a troll, and the troll has this ability, and make sure that you bring lots of weapons that cause fire because they're susceptible to flame damage or whatever. And it was so frustrating, so that in the mid-70s, I took out the Monster Manual and I renamed every species. So a descriptor for an orc might represent 2 or 3 different types of species on Nikos, because they were generally close enough to be kind of banded together in the colloquial definition, which is ironic because the Monster Manuals divisions of species was actually just that. They took the term for a gnome that was used in, say, Germanic culture and merged it with the trolls of another culture and came up with the defining characteristics of the different species names by just parsing them out of the original lore. So the giants became not just the giants, but the hill giants and frost giants and fire giants and cloud giants and storm giants, etc., etc. So being a troll ally or troll adjacent, you could be a Groll. Groll is a beast man, a beast monster, and they vary in size all the way up to what would be considered troll size. They're like giant bison men or yak men, and they're bestial and carnivorous in nature, and generally not a lot of fun to hang around with. Then you've got the Urgluk, and the Urgluk refers generally to what you think of as an ogre, but ogres are really kind of small-ish giants, right? So some of the Urgluk can be rather massive, and so on. And so each species has its own thing. So when we talk about the descriptions here, you notice I didn't include a monster category for something that I'll introduce every week, and that's because session zeros don't generally have to do with the actual combat or conflict, and that's left to actual play sessions. So learning what the monsters are in Nikos would be a requirement. I mean, you have to be a player to be able to experience the different kinds of creatures and monsters. Matter of fact, my group this last week got to meet the vagabond bearcat and the beings known as Starbucks. So if you are familiar and have seen some of my materials, you have a leg up on that because I've used the Starbucks image as the backdrop for my Facebook page and things like that. But generally speaking, the monstrous types are discovered only in play. They're not written down anywhere yet. That's also a characteristic, as Mozart used to have the songs already in his head, but they just weren't written down. And so there's a joke in the movie Amadeus when his associate says to him, "If it's in your head, it's not doing anybody any good. Write it down." And he says, "Writing down is just scribbling and bibbling." I have not yet quite scribbled and bibbled my way through them that way. So, GMV, anything particular you'd like to know about, hear about before I wind up this session? Because I'm going to try to get here a little bit early just so I can get ready for the 11 o'clock. The process, if you hadn't figured it out, is that I generally put my materials together shortly before the episodes. But now that I'm operating 2 shows a night, I'm going to be endeavoring to do that earlier in the day. After this, I've reached my Waterloo as far as that's concerned. Not to be problematic in any way. And the mystery third person, whoever you are, if you want to be included in the conversation, feel free to drop a line into the chat as well. Okay. So you have a new player coming on. Okay. So the trick with story arc for a player is that you should be developing the story arc from your perspective and finding ways to make the player's life match in with that. If you're looking for assistance in developing his backstory, my only recommendation is that you may not be aware of this, but Dungeons & Dragons in its older iterations didn't have a backstory description requirement. There was nothing that was necessary because the storyteller was supposed to basically build the character from the point of creation both ways, forward and backward. You as you move forward, you think of things that happened in the character's past and you invent it. You just arbitrarily do that. Now, of course, we spent more hours on backstory. So, okay, so you spent hours on the backstory. So now it's just a matter of aligning which pieces of his backstory match the story that you're wanting to tell. And granted, some game masters are very sandboxy and don't have a story to tell, in which case backstory drop-ins is easy because you just simply say, "Here you are, you've got that background, yep, But if you've actually built it in so that there's an explanation for why he's doing the things he's doing in character or whatever, then yes, you got to find ways to nest that into the future. And generally, what I try to do is think 3 to 4 adventures away. So if they are starting in this week in a game and there's already a storyline going on, they don't have to match in perfectly yet because they're new to the system, they're new to the world, they're new to the players, and they haven't shared anything about their backgrounds yet. So therefore, there's no need for their backstories to actually merge. But by the time you get to the third or fourth adventure with 2 players playing together, they generally would start asking questions about each other, like, where did you come from? Great example is in the movie Conan the Barbarian, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, the first one, where he sits down with the archer rogue that's traveling with him, and they're talking about their backgrounds and their gods, and that was their moment of bonding, because before that they'd done actions together, they had adventures together, but they really didn't know much about each other, and so they took the time in that one scene to actually sit back and look at each other and talk. And so that's really where the backstory comes into the adventure. So if group A and player B get together, then by the time you got into the third session, something of what player B coming into the game had in mind gets incorporated into the story. So you shouldn't take a huge amount of burden just to project what his character's path would have been like without being a character, and to look at what his life would have been like staying in backstory mode for yet another week. What would that have done? Would that have changed? 1 week, nothing. 2 weeks, maybe nothing. 3 weeks, definitely going to be something that's going to be influencing his decisions going forward from then. So that's the way I would resolve that. Thank you. As some of you may know, the algorithm of YouTube breaks up my presentation periodically with advertisements, and Game Master has sort of taken on the notification process to let me know when the ads kick in, at least as far as he's concerned, because he loses that few precious seconds of conversation. And so I have actually been speaking. I have actually been speaking, and the ads were going on, and I thought I was answering his question, but his question was lost in the ads department. So now he mentions that. So if you are a viewer and you've got a separate ad sequence, you can do the same thing with me. Let me know, and I will pause for the few seconds to get it back online. So therefore, GMV, what you're going to want to do is basically look 3 weeks ahead and what kind of adventure you're going to do, and then weave part of his backstory's trajectory into the future and play into it at that level, because that will give him a reason to connect the story and become a part of the group, because now they collectively have been working on something that he wanted to be accomplished. So, for example, let's say he has a background where he's looking for new spells because he's a wizard. If the first session he's in is a fight scene, that's fine. He plays through the encounter and he works with the party and whatever. And the second adventure maybe takes him by a wizard's tower or whatever, so you can have an encounter with somebody who is parlaying purloined materials stolen from the wizard's tower, or maybe the party gets convinced to go and rob the wizard's tower. In whatever way you're able to link the player's intent with the party's agenda and cause it to be a bullet point on their list. That's how you build the longevity and build the community of your games group. Kind of link them together. So I think I'm really dwelling over the fact that my outline isn't finished for next episode. I think I'm gonna hop out of here a little bit early. I want to thank you guys for staying with me for as long as you have. I don't anticipate this episode will go to YouTube, only because I started off so unprofessionally with my sound improperly set and such. But nonetheless, it's been very helpful to me, and it'll stay on YouTube. It'll stay on Twitch for at least a few weeks, and I will endeavor to clip at least a highlight or two out of it, and those stay forever. So thank you again for being here today. I appreciate your participation. Don't forget, if you haven't yet, click the that rhymed. Click the follow button on this episode and watch for the information I have up on at you at Nikos RPG on YouTube. Thank you again, guys, and I will see you in about half an hour or so. A little bit over half an hour.